here's Brody Brazil.
Hey, welcome back to the channel, and the topic of this video is MLB's relocation application process. It's what's next for the Oakland A's with their intentions to go to Southern Nevada, but it's also a process that, let's be honest, we just do not know much about. And that's because it's rare. It's only happened once in the last 51 years. And that was the Montreal Expos, who Major League Baseball actually took ownership of at one point, before they eventually became the Washington Nationals in 2005. So kind of an unconventional, unwritten, so to speak, process. Like, there are guidelines, there is some framework, but not a lot of us even know much about it. So we're all here trying to piece this together to really understand what is a next and big and most ultimate step if the A's are in fact able to move to Las Vegas. Here's one of the things that we know. The process begins with a formal MLB application, which has reportedly, according to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the application has reportedly already been submitted. Now, I want to be clear on that. I'm not sure if that means they've stated their intentions or they've faxed in a cover letter. They had the opening document. I don't know, what this consists of, if it's like a long report, if it's like a 500-page binder, what type of evidence gets presented. Like, what does the application actually look like? Is it a PDF? Is it a DocuSign? I have no clue. But to some extent, the Las Vegas Review-Journal says the A's have already started this process, which is no surprise, right? Like, the financials and the approvals from the state of Nevada and Clark County, they are pretty much in place. And so now this is the next, and this is the ultimate, and not necessarily the final thing, but it's the next really big and only hurdle remaining for the A's to make this move. So apparently, to some degree, the application process has already been started. But there is no hard timeline for this process. The commissioner has said himself that it could take several weeks or months. Ultimately, what we do know is that it concludes with a vote. Owners of every major league team of the 30 teams get to submit their votes, and to pass, after considerations and recommendations, they need a 75% confirming vote if, in fact, the A's are going to move. They need to get out there, the A's do, with education and information. They have to basically put their pitch forward, their best foot forward, and show the other owners why the A's deserve a yes vote in terms of relocating to Las Vegas, why that's good for the A's, and why that's good for all the franchises of Major League Baseball. So no hard timeline, though, on when this could all come together or eventually conclude. But there is one hard deadline. The A's do need a binding deal by January 15th of 2024 to remain on MLB's revenue sharing. Now, that is part of the most recent CBA that was signed, the collective bargaining agreement between the Players Association and Major League Baseball. If the A's do not have a new venue or facility somewhere by January of 2024, they are off MLB's revenue sharing. And that's really the urgent push behind a lot of this. Certainly the A's for decades have been trying to secure a new home. That's been independent of this hard deadline, this reasoning of why things got pushed through so quickly with the Nevada State Legislature, and why they need a confirming vote by the owners literally this summer before they head into the winter and that January 15th date. So to be clear, it's not like this is a August 15th deadline. It's January. So there still are months left, but there ultimately is kind of a hard out, so to speak, in terms of when they need a binding deal. And by the way, a binding deal, what does that mean? A lot of people already assumed that the Nevada State Legislature approving $380 million of public funding, that's actually not the binding deal we think. What constitutes a binding agreement from a lot of people's perspective is probably a development agreement with the Las Vegas Stadium Authority. Because again, the public funding part of it is not necessarily binding, because the A's actually have to enter into that for it to be binding. And to enter into that, they need to have that development agreement with the Las Vegas Stadium Authority. So to be clear, as of right now, a binding agreement does not exist. And the relocation application obviously is just getting underway. So we're not at this point yet where the A's are secured to continue on revenue sharing after January of 2024. Going back to the process, like what does it entail? A couple weeks ago, Commissioner Rob Manfred had this quote, which probably summarizes the process as good as I've ever seen it anywhere. Quote, "They have to submit an application, the A's do. There are pretty rigorous requirements about the application. You have to talk about the market you're leaving, the efforts you've made there, the markets you want to go to, why it's better. It then goes to a relocation committee that has to review the application and make recommendations on things like operating territory, home television territory. That recommendation comes to me, Rob Manfred, goes to the executive council. They ultimately make recommendations to the clubs, and then there has to be that 3/4 vote, the 75% confirming vote for relocation. And so, yeah, the recommendations will be made to the clubs. At some point, that executive council says, well, we've reviewed this intimately, and you can have a look at it too, but we've really gone over everything. Here is our recommendation. We have seen this, like in the NBA, for example. The Sacramento Kings, when they tried to relocate, their executive council said, you know what, this is not a good idea. Do not vote for this. Turns out the owners voted against the Kings' relocation. Now, I'm not saying at all that will play out in this similar fashion, but it is a similar process of a council that makes a recommendation to the owners, and then the owners each get their individual team votes. By the way, that committee is going to be headed up by Brewers owner Mark Atanasio, plus 2 others. And I'm not still certain if those other 2 owners have been named as part of this 3-member committee. And what's interesting here is the Milwaukee Brewers were recently in baseball news because they have about a $450 million bill for upgrades and repairs to their stadium, the 20 or so year old American Family Field. And nobody exactly threatened relocation on the Brewers, but it was kind of hinted that if these upgrades and maintenance issues don't get handled, the future is uncertain. So here you have an owner of a team who also is kind of in this public-private money, maybe relocation situation. This is the person heading it up. I don't know much about Mr. Atanasio, so I'm not going to suggest anything, but it is interesting knowing that about his team, where they're at, and the A's as part of this relocation application process. I would also have to say that maybe it's more understandable because he runs a market and a team in a market like Milwaukee, which is not like, let's say, the New York Yankees reviewing the Oakland A's situation. It's more of a comparable and compatible market situation, for whatever that's worth. Again, that's just the head of the executive council that's going to make a recommendation to all the clubs. How about externally? I saw this on Forbes.com, what that relocation committee led by Mr. Atanasio, what that is going to consider. Here's what Forbes says, and actually, this wasn't even in recent times. This was from a couple years ago, so it's not particular to the A's or even necessarily the Tampa Bay Rays. Quote, what the process entails, that ranges from interim ballpark options, which, by the way, is super interesting for the A's. They are at least in an interim spot for 3, if you count 4 years in Oakland. Like if this is all approved before 2024 and they do spend a final year, let's say, in Oakland, that's also kind of considered an interim season. Let me go back to this. The relocation committee will consider, quote, that ranges from interim ballpark options, a market study around corporate support for season tickets and suites, corporate interest for sponsorships, a regional television deal, and most importantly, a land acquisition and funding model for a ballpark. Those are information pieces and details right there that Mr. Manfred did not exactly say, but let's go over them. Interim ballpark options. Again, that is a sticky, unique, interesting situation. And don't get me wrong, when the Expos moved to D.C., They were at RFK Stadium for 3 years, but at least that was a major league-sized facility in the city that they were already going to. They were fortunate that that had already existed for a prior major league entity in the Washington Senators. A market study around corporate support for season tickets and suites. Well, in terms of corporate support, yeah, I think Las Vegas has a ton of that, but that's not really the question. How many fans can you draw to a 30,000-seat ballpark to try and aim for an average of 28,000 per game over 30 years? That doesn't happen anywhere else with those numbers. Why would it happen here? Anyway, corporate interest for sponsorships, I think that's high, in all fairness. I don't think that's going to be an issue at all for Las Vegas. A regional television deal. Now, this is hitting close to home. That's what I and we do here. So I'm not going to comment too much on that part, but obviously that is to be considered. The television market that they're in versus the one that they're going to. And most importantly, a land acquisition and funding model for a ballpark. Now, land acquisition already seems in place. The free 9 acres with Bally's and the Tropicana site and GLPI even giving $175 million to the A's for future purposes on this site. So most of it's in place, but how about the 9-acre part of it? Is that enough for a ballpark with a retractable roof? And not to mention the funding model for a ballpark. I mean, the public funding part is structured. Is there any plan about the rest of it or any knowledge of the rest of it, how the rest of a $1.5+ billion park comes through? How about this? What about cost overruns? Nothing costs what it initially is projected at. So if we're saying $1.5 billion here in 2023, what if it ends up to be $1.9 or $2.1 billion? How's that going to get covered? I would think that that has to be part of the A's presentation in this process. Let me also tell you another interested party in all of this, and they don't really get the say here, but they have to be considered, is the Major League Baseball Players Association. Like, for example, there was this talk about the A's having an interim home of Reno for 3 seasons, playing at Greater Nevada Field in Reno. And no offense to Reno, but that ballpark and that city are not set up for Major League Baseball. Summerlin, Nevada. I know it's not its own city. It's a development. It's a planned development in Las Vegas. But the minor league ballpark where the Aviators play, not currently set up at all. They have to convert the field surface to artificial turf. They have to change the lighting system. They have to build new clubhouses somewhere. Major League Baseball, the Players Association, is very interested in particular about, wait, what are you doing? What are you going to make us play through? Is this fair to the A's players of those seasons? Is it fair to the visiting teams that have to make these concessions? Like, for example, as I record this today, it's 77 degrees in Oakland, first pitch. It's 111 as a high temperature in Las Vegas, Nevada. For the 3 seasons that they would play at the minor league ballpark, like, it's a Sunday. It's a getaway day. The White Sox would have to play the A's in a day game in Las Vegas in 111 degree heat. They're going to have some thoughts about that temporary part of the situation. Not so much the permanent part, but the temporary part. There was also a Q&A interaction with Rob Manfred, the commissioner, about the move here. And I'll read you the question, then the answer. The question was, is there any worry about moving from the 10th largest TV market to the 40th and building a 30,000-seat ballpark that would be the smallest and turn a team into a perpetual receiver of revenue sharing? Whoa. That's a lot there. Basically saying if being a small market team was already a problem, and that's something that the other Major League teams are going to consider, if they didn't like that, why would they like this move to get even smaller and maybe more limited in the reach? Manfred said, quote, again, I'm not going to talk today. I just think it's unfair to the A's in saying like he's not going to talk for them or ahead of them. They deserve to file their relocation application when I have all of the information in that application. If and when I see concerns in respect to it, I'll talk about it publicly. We'll hold you to that, Commissioner. Will you really? Yeah, okay. Until that happens, I'm not going to do it. So I respect him for, obviously not overstepping or stepping ahead, but clearly he's not ready to comment on it because he realizes that those things are potential issues. So here's what 75% of a vote looks like. There's 30 teams. You need 23 teams to say yes, if it's going to be a yes, 23 or more, or if it's going to be a no, you need 8 teams or more to say no. 23 and 8 are the numbers you need to know about 75%. Are there 8 teams right now saying no? I would have to imagine there's at least a couple geographically. And you can figure out they're all California teams, the Angels, Padres, Dodgers, probably the Diamondbacks, just based on territory and regions and some of the things that have been explained in this video. I don't know where the things stand. I honestly have no clue. Your guess is as good as mine. All the things that go into this relocation application, how they're presented, how they're pitched, and the opinions of the other owners across the league. But at this moment, I'm wondering about the downtime, how this is affecting the process and the momentum. Everything happened so quickly with Nevada and the state legislature and the funding, the public funding approval. It was within 10 days, bang, 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 hearing, vote, one vote, amendments, more votes, done deal. Whoa, that happened so fast. And now we're kind of in this lull of, I'm saying downtime, until Major League Baseball has the ability to go over everything and research it, have an opinion on it. The more downtime that exists here, I don't know, I really don't, if that benefits or if it hurts the A's chances of what they're trying to do. I really don't. But I also think the All-Star break is going to have some impact on this. And I say that because the All-Star break, the All-Star week, it's not really a weekend anymore. The All-Star week, owners will get together. This summer, it's in Seattle. They'll have more face-to-face conversations. They know this is a topic of interest. So all of that, it's kind of like a trade deadline. Why don't deals happen all the time? Why is there a flurry at the deadline? Because people know and they're actively engaged with each other. Or it's kind of like winter meetings, for example. Why is baseball so quiet and then all of a sudden winter meetings happen and the GMs are making moves like crazy? So I do think the face-to-face aspect of the All-Star break might actually speed up this process, might actually sway momentum on how the owners feel. And that's right around the corner, obviously, as I record this video. So hopefully some of that helps you out. Again, this is a thing that not a lot of us have background or information or experience with, and that's a good thing. I don't think anybody likes seeing sports teams relocate. But because we don't have the information, we're not sure really how this plays out or what to expect. So hopefully some of that got squared away in this video, which, by the way, you made it here all the way to the end. You know I appreciate that. Thumbs up on it. That'll help this video out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that I can see you back here next time.